In the last episode of Costanoa County, we ended up with a significant sum of money in our bank account. So what I wanted to do in this episode is leverage that bank balance that we have and start some bigger infrastructure projects so we can prep the main core city here for some more residential development and commercial development. So what that's going to entail is moving some of our more noxious uses, like specifically this landfill, and getting them away from the center of our city. And then on top of that, I want to tie up some loose ends that I left in the last episode. One of those being the high school over here, and then there's a couple other city services that I want to take care of. But definitely the first thing that I want to do is I want to start moving this landfill, and I want to do that in a somewhat realistic way. I had mentioned this as being temporary before, and it is temporary, but it will have some effect on the land after we move it. Not in the game, but in reality, landfills like this obviously leave behind a lot of waste, literal waste behind. But there are ways to essentially cap that and then make use of the land after. So what I want to do is move it away, and then I'll probably put some sort of a park here. And then I want to finish off this space more broadly by putting in some trees to make it look a little bit less barren. So I'll get started by first siting out where I want to put this landfill, and I've already done that off camera, and the place that I want to put it is over here by this peninsula right here. The reason for that is it's still relatively close to the main city here via this highway, but it's far enough away where it's not really immediately visible, like if you're over here. And there's enough land here that it should be able to service the city until we get the incinerator plant. So I'll go ahead and start there by first buying this tile and then kind of laying down a small roadway network. And it may really only just be the one road for now, but laying that out and then starting to move the landfill over there. So if I zoom over into that area, I think we'll probably need at a minimum this tile, and I think this one and this one as well. So we'll purchase those. I actually didn't see how much that was. It looks like about 60,000. What I'll do next is I'll start to get the city services in check, and that will pretty much just be the electricity and the water. And with the way that I built this map, I did bring this larger line through here, and then I also brought the water underneath the road, so I can just hook up directly into those, then they'll hook into the city. And as you can see, we do need a lot of extra water output. That's something that I will be taking care of later on. But for now, I'm just going to hook in, and it will be exporting, or we will be importing water and sewage, as well as possibly electricity, depending on how much we use. So for the roadway, I want to kind of look at the topography here and get a entrance or an exit off of the highway that makes sense and isn't at a different point on the hill. Like up here doesn't really make sense. It's way too high up. Here, I don't really want to put it on a curve. I think I'd rather go in somewhere like right here and then take a road off and put it somewhere around here. And what I'm seeing too is I think I'll want to do a little bit of grading up front just to make this a little bit more reasonable. I think back to here, take a little bit off that hill and then just soften it up. And I think actually what I really want is for this facility to face towards the highway. And let's see how big it is. Yeah, I want it to look something like that. And again, this is not a facility I care too much in terms of how it looks, so I'm not going to worry that much about making it look perfect. I think right here will be good enough. And then I'll draw that out. And then let's go ahead and make sure that's all connected up. Water and electricity. The electricity, what I'll have to do is put in another transformer station in this area, and it looks like it's not fitting exactly right there, so I may have to extend things out and fit this in somehow. Or what I probably will do is actually just take a little bit out of the garbage facility right here. And it's going to be a little bit awkward in that orientation. So what I think I'll do is I'll just make a small alley right here and then flip it. And that's going to take a lot of space out of our landfill, but it is something we need that power in this area, so it has to be done. And then I'll even expand this just a little bit since we lost some of that area. Okay, so that's power and water sorted out. I'm gonna kind of check back in with this facility. What I want to happen is I want the stored garbage here to go down to the point where it's mostly in here. I don't know that that's going to happen. What I could do is I could just delete this one and that would work. Or I could possibly deactivate it. Although I don't think that will really have the effect that I want. And maybe, yeah, so actually what I wanted to do is start emptying. So you don't need to do this. You can just delete this facility. That's new in City Skylines too. But I do want to empty it in somewhat of a realistic way. Just because, yeah, in reality, you don't just like have this disappear. So I'll try to empty it. And then once it's empty, I'll put a little like hill there just to signify that there used to be a landfill and a little park area. So now that that's out of the way, we saw two of the issues that this city has right now. One of them is water and the other is sewage. They're kind of one and the same. If we check out our water assets, we do have this French water tower, which at least would accommodate some of the sewage needs because there's an add-on to that. I'm not sure that I want the French tower in this city. If we just take a look, I don't know that it fits in this area quite yet. And there's not a place that I am thinking that I want to put it. So as far as the water situation goes, I think I want to put one of these groundwater pumping stations in, and we'll probably have to take a little bit of land out of this farm, unfortunately. Unfortunate for them, I suppose, but I'm assuming that there's some sort of deal that would be made where we're actually like the city's actually buying the land up and then placing that facility on that land. I mean, you see sometimes like windmills and stuff on farms, wind energy on farms. So it's not totally unrealistic to see those types of facilities on farmland. But I think it's a good opportunity just right here. I think that will do just fine. And I think we're getting the full 75,000 output kind of no matter where we place this. So I'll go ahead and place it there and that should work just fine. So that's water sorted. The other is the sewage, and that's a little bit more difficult because we need one of these like options here, either the sewage outlet, which I do not like to use, or the water treatment plant, which is 400,000. And I don't think we actually, yeah, it's not even unlocked yet. So let me check what it takes to unlock that. It's actually just 2. So I'm going to do that right now. While I'm in here too, I want to make sure I am unlocking the large sports parks because I'll use that at the high school. And then let me just wrap up this park. This farm rather. And then while I'm here, I'll just go ahead and put a few trees around that facility just to buffer it from the farm. So we take a look back. Yeah, I won't have enough for the water treatment plant for quite a while. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, that groundwater pumping station plus the landfill plus the land that we bought actually zapped most of our budget. So with that in mind, I think what I'll probably be doing is I'm going to go ahead and detail this high school up a little bit because that should be a relatively cheap endeavor as opposed to expanding or placing down roads or anything like that. So I'll go ahead and take that on. I am a little bit concerned. I unlocked this high school sports park, which I don't think, yeah, I want it to go over in this area, but we don't own that tile yet. And if we check how much that is, I don't think I'm going to be able to afford it. Just realistically, yeah, it's 52,000. So I can't actually buy that. So I'll go ahead and detail up what I can in here. I don't think we'll need the extension, but I'll make sure there's enough space for probably 2 extension wings right there and right there. But otherwise, I'll just detail in maybe with some minor perks. So after taking a look at things, I kind of realized that without the money, it is actually pretty difficult to detail this properly because I just don't know the spacing things. Like I know I want to get a parking lot in, but I mentioned those extension wings as well, and I might just have to forego one of those in the future and put maybe one here and a parking lot here. But without the money to actually start placing things, it's hard to gauge exactly where it should all go. For now, I will just move on to what's next on my list. So I am back at the garbage facility here, and the reason for that is I checked the other one, and the total amount of storage space in that facility is lower than this one, but I do want to have a little bit of extra overhead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this facility kind of as much as I can. And then what I'll do, because it's relatively inexpensive, is I'll landscape things. And I've put the simulation speed on 3x speed just to build up our money once again. So this is what I was going for. If you're over here in the main part of Costanoa and you look out over the bay here, you don't actually really see that landfill over here. So that is what I was going for, and it's a big difference from if you look back here. This landfill is obviously very visible, and that's going to be pretty much impossible to landscape well enough to the point that it's not visible. So it's a huge eyesore. And yeah, moving it all the way over here, not only is it way further away, it's just easier to hide it with that landscaping. So with that out of the way, and I did essentially use up all my money landscaping, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let things simulate for a while so that I can get enough money to take on my next projects. And while I was simulating, I did notice that I do have some commercial demand, and there's a few spots in the city that I've been wanting to make sure that I get some commercial into. One of those is right here. The reason I want to get it in now is just so I can finish up this alley. So I'll go ahead and do that while I'm waiting for things to simulate. And didn't manage to get the whole thing. There we go. Okay, so now it's all in there, so I can finally finish off my alleyways right here. And I'm lucky that none of the zoning got messed up. There's some other places, like I do want to fill out some of this probably with commercial. There's another spot over here I want to be putting some commercial, but since I just sapped that demand, and it is coming back a little bit, so I'll try to get maybe one in. And you'll notice I moved that over a little bit just because it looks like it's cutting into the hill a little bit more than I'd like. And it's not too bad, but what I'll do is I'll wait for that to come in. I'm not exactly keen on how it's looking here. And what I actually will do just right away is I know that that's not gonna be exactly what I want. I want a little bit of space there because there's a path. So I will give that space and then just add a little bit of landscaping probably later on. For now, I will leave it as such. And I'm not exactly sure. Probably just fill out this area as well. Not 100% sure what I want to do here yet, just because that is a lot of commercial kind of concentrated in this one area. I think that is fine, given that this is kind of a prominent intersection here that I've mentioned before, where Willow Street, this larger street here, comes in, meets here, as well as this Belmont Street intersects right here as well. So it is in my mind, a good place to have that sort of concentration. But it is a little bit much, also considering that there's all of this over here and all of this over here. So I'll continue thinking about what I want to be putting there. Maybe some larger residential buildings might do. And now that I've just said that, I think that is something I want to have sort of in this area, particularly near this area right here, I think would be good. So I will be putting in then just one smaller medium density building there. And what do I want to put in? I did add the new German medium density housing, but I don't think that will really work in this area, just because while it is a straight road, that does work well with some of the German assets. It isn't like a full block that I'm developing. So I think it makes a little bit more sense to put in some, probably just like an American medium density building here. I'll probably get a fairly sizable one, maybe about that size, and just kind of see what it looks like when it comes in. And you'll notice like this area, I've mentioned this before, is kind of like primed for redevelopment at some point. And that pressure is going to continue as these bigger buildings are being built as well. But because there's still some land left here, I'm not gonna be doing any major redevelopments right here. I'm gonna wait until this is all fully developed here before I do anything like that. So I'm just gonna wait for that to spawn in, and then I think in the meantime, I'll go ahead and landscape this area. Ultimately, just some simple detailing there. I did add like a small bench and a grill back here, and then a gazebo. And one of the reasons I love these props is I did delete some of the trees back here, and I think I already did some landscaping back here possibly, but when I add the props, it's like a signal to me that for sure this is a place that I have gone through and given my own personal touch to. So I love that we have access to these props in the vanilla game, and it's cool to make these like just small spaces that add a lot of character to your city. So as I was simulating, I also noticed that a lot of the services were still not at 100%. So I just went through and moved most of them up to 100%. Some of them, like healthcare, I don't yet have at 100 just because it's very expensive, but I bumped most of them up at least a little bit. And part of that is we just have the money for it now, but I was also noticing that we were getting more of these waiting for ambulance symbols. So it was clear that we do need to add some capacity for that. And I also noticed that this building here has come in. So if I take a look at it right now, it kind of stands out next to these other smaller homes. That is going to be the case for a little bit longer. Like I said, I don't want to redevelop just yet. But it is making me consider like what I actually want to be putting in this sort of an area. I know we have like corner buildings that come out of this EU mixed housing and NA mixed housing, as well as some of the other newer assets. But I don't really think I want to be putting a corner building there, just because it can't continue up this way. So it'll look a little bit abrupt with the bare wall on this face. I think I am just going to keep leaving that for now. I'm just not sure what I want to have in that space yet. So I'll just keep thinking about it, and if something comes along, like a signature building, for example, I still have that space to put it. That should be useful down the line. For now, I am just gonna simulate a little bit further. I think I'm almost at the amount of money that I'll need for my upgrades here. I do have it, but I just want to make sure I have a little bit extra, because I actually may need to be buying a tile if I want to take that on. And I've just said that, but I think what I want to do is ignore the football field for now and instead just add a extension wing in here and some parking, and I should be able to finish off this high school, so I'll go ahead and do that. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with the detailing I've done on the high school here. A lot of it was just putting in surfaces and then filling up some spaces with trees. I added some minor details like this gazebo, and then I think this fountain right in the front really brings things together. It kind of makes this otherwise dead space right here fit in a lot better. And then I tried to add in some benches, like thinking that maybe this is where some of the students would sit and wait while they are being picked up from school. And then a couple parking lots in the back. I don't think this is really enough parking, but once I get the football field over in here, I think I'll add some additional parking in there, probably near these crosswalks so that it's easy for students to get to the high school here. I didn't make a ton of money while I was doing that, but we do have 53,000 now. And now that I've been working on that for a while, I kind of want to check back with the garbage facility over here. And I think it's, yeah, you can see it's a lot smaller than it was before. And if I take a look, it's at 150 tons now. And that means that this one, yeah, has 870. So almost all the garbage now has been moved over to our new landfill. And because it's pretty much everything, I'm not going to be too picky about it and say that that's close enough to the whole of the facility being emptied. So I'm going to delete that now. And I want to designate now this space to a park area. But the first thing I want to do is where that facility was, I want to go ahead and raise things up just a little bit to signify that this used to be a dump area. So there's kind of a unnatural looking hill that has formed in this region right here. Doesn't exactly fit in with the rest of what's going on. It's, you know, about that height is probably good enough. I'll feather things out just a little bit. So that is where the park will be. And just to formalize that, I think what I want to do is add some paths around and then possibly some parking at the front. And let me make this a little bit nicer. That's good enough. Yeah, just add some paths around this area. It's going to need some additional parking here as well, I think, just for general overall look of having it be a park. So I'll add in a modest parking lot, and I'll try to reuse some of the facilities that are here and say that like where that old building was is still developable for something like a few parks. And I think what makes sense is something like a skate park and maybe some tennis courts. So I'll do that. And then that leaves this area potentially to have a road back. And I think I just want to move this over one more so that I can get, I don't think I have the money for it though. Yeah, I don't have the money. I wanted to move it back so that I could get a path through here. But for now, I guess that's just gonna have to do. I may have to have paths coming out on either side here. I think that is actually fine. So I'll probably not be able to build much here, but I will add it in just so that it's there. Yeah, and those are just gonna kind of come out and go around this hill here. And I'm gonna leave this area of the hill still undeveloped. But for now, since I don't actually have the money for that, I've kind of signaled to myself that this is a park area. So I'm gonna leave it as is for now and then detail that in later because I did just spend all my money doing that. And since I deleted that garbage facility, there should be a bit more in our budget freed up. And I think what I have to spend that on clearly is the healthcare department. And that's gonna be, I think I'll just give it everything I got and check back in with the actual budget. Maybe let that simulate just for a little bit before I leave this screen. But it looks like we still have, yeah, still have enough here. 40,000 monthly budget to play with. And that should be enough to at least like allow me to simulate some and then add some zoning in a couple places. Yeah, so I surveyed things, and really the only place that I felt like made sense to add zoning was right about here, this area. And for some reason that's not building in the way that I want. Let me double check that. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I just added some zoning in here. I remember that I kind of marked this area as a commercial area, so I left it at that. And then I just added in some small homes around it just to fill things out. And we're, again, going to be bumping up against our boundary here. I don't want to do anything with that today, but that's in the future. I think this is a pretty natural place to expand, is like right about in here. If we look at the topography, it's still okay enough to be putting things in, but this is kind of getting into the territory where I'm not going to be able to build in the traditional way anymore. And I'm going to have to adjust the zoning or adjust the grid accordingly as well. So there's a lot of empty space in here, and there's definitely a lot of demand for the types of uses that would go here, like commercial and some industrial still as well. So I'm going to try to fill out some of this space. And I think what I'll do is I'll kind of avoid this street right here, Cozy Street, for now, and then I'll fill out pretty much everything else in here if I can. And then while I was kind of looking around at stuff I could place into this area, I actually noticed that I believe we don't have a park maintenance depot. And let me just verify that by zooming out here. Yeah, I don't think we have one. So that is a city services area right here. So I think it's the perfect place for one. We don't have the money now for it, but I think that is something that I will put there in the future, should I actually remember to do that. So for now, I will just go ahead and then leave this area empty. So that leaves kind of this whole space as the last to develop in. The reason I've left Cozy Street is because it's kind of just like right next to the highway. I'm not exactly sure what I want to put there, so I don't want to be too hasty. Similar to how I did this facility here, and I can tell now that I again have this issue going on here. But yeah, similar to what I did here, I think I might want to do something possibly similar to that here. Have a little bit more of a specialized build. But because this is happening, what I want to do is I'm just going to create a small path. And that should fix that. Hopefully I get in the same building that I had in here. I'll keep an eye on that though. And it looks like I did get that same building type in again. So that is the one I want in that area, just because it kind of matches that corner look. And yeah, I think like in this sort of an area too is another space that I might consider doing something similar to this, having a more dedicated build. So that would be like right here in these sorts of areas near the highway. That's kind of where I want to start thinking about having builds that cater to this specific area. And then while I was over here kind of just admiring the high school that I have, I did notice this specific area right here is a little bit barren. So I want to add in just a little bit of landscaping right here. And that should do it. And this is another one of those areas that's a candidate for redevelopment right along this corridor. You can see it kind of just looks a little bit funky, especially, man, if you live here and this shadow, like that's just not great with the particular building style that I have here. Some of these like row homes would work a lot better because they'd bump up against the road here and they wouldn't necessarily be in the shadow in that same way. So that's another thing I'll think about for the future. But I think for now, like, I don't want to just overdo the redevelopment. This one, it's very close to being ready for it. But yeah, I don't want to be too hasty on that front either. The other spot I'm looking at now is just right in here. I think it at this point makes sense to start putting stuff in here. And we do have some more commercial demand, and this is another corridor that I want to focus some commercial on. It might be worthwhile as well to actually start placing in some of the mixed housing over here. I will try, I think, on this side, just a few of them. Let's see what pops in if I just do that. So that shouldn't look too weird, I think. It zaps a lot of that demand. I do just want to, yeah, let that simulate it and see what it looks like, because it may look a little bit out of place. We had these two buildings come in here. I don't know that I love it, but I also don't dislike it enough to remove it, I think, at this point. what I'm most concerned about is just like this firehouse here. It looks a little bit out of place, but that can be resolved later. We come in and look at it at the ground level. It looks a little bit odd, but you do see that in cities where things have developed in such a way that you have a lower resident, or you have a lower density use, or a smaller building, something like this, next to these larger buildings. But I actually do like how, I love how just like these buildings look, it just in general. So I think I want to keep that one there. And this is a great place actually to have these rear alleys, because you have these little areas right here that do need the access. So I'm liking that enough to stick with it, at least. At some point, these smaller homes over here are gonna have to go. But for now, I think what has come out of that is good enough, and I'm happy with keeping it. I think I may want some more. See what, I don't know what kind this is actually. This is an interesting building because it has the rooftop that is just open right here. So that's safe. But I think I want something similar on this side, I believe. And then on kind of over in this end, what I'll do is we'll maybe put a parking lot there, and then put some of these row homes on both sides here. And then just some corner lots like that. That should allow me as well to finish off this alley. And then I want to add some paths in because I left the space pretty much just for that. And oh man, this game, it loves to just make things difficult for you sometimes. Yeah, that's about what I want. And then I think I'm gonna have to figure out what happened here. I don't know that I can actually really do much about what happened there. So instead of that building, what I'll have to do is probably just add in a small playground, and I think that'll suffice. Yeah, this building ends up being really small compared to these other ones, but I think it's good to have a bit of a mix in here. When you're at the street level, it doesn't look too out of place. What looks much more out of place actually is probably this parking lot, but I think it works well enough. So I mentioned at the beginning of the episode not having any sewage processing, and that the French water tower, there's an add-on for it where it'll serve a second purpose, which is to allow for it to process sewage. And I mentioned not really wanting to place it because I wasn't sure where to put it, but I actually came up with the idea of throwing it on top of this hill right here, because in reality, water towers tend to go on top of hills, or really just any sort of water storage facility, just because the pressure will be higher if the facility is on top of the hill, and that water pressure is what allows the homes lower down to, you know, be able to use that water and have, like, for example, high water pressure on your showers, which everybody loves. So what I want to do is I actually want to place one of those up there, and I think it can kind of serve as a dual purpose, maybe, where it looks a little bit like a water tower. So placing it up there might give it like kind of a dual aesthetic. So what I want to do is then I want to bring this road, which I kind of intentionally and also accidentally wanted to save for something like this. And I want to add in, this is the filtration system, which I was talking about, which allows it to pump sewage as well. And it seems like a pretty sizable amount of sewage treatments. Let's check that out. Yeah, it actually gives us, looks like more than enough for our whole system, which is quite interesting, actually. I don't feel like it was really that much, but sewage treatment, okay, 250,000 cubic meters per month. That is quite a lot. I feel like that's more than the actual thing pumps in terms of water. Yeah, it has a 20,000 cubic meter water output, but then 250,000 for sewage treatment. That seems like, to be honest, that seems incorrect. I feel like that should maybe be 25,000, like there's an extra zero there, but I'll take it. That's a lot of sewage treatment just for one building like that. And it saves us the 400,000 that I was gonna spend on this water treatment plant. So that's good. And just want to come back and check how this area turned out. Yeah, like I like how it kind of moves up to this other height. Like it's not just one big building sitting by itself. Now it's a kind of a gradient building down. That's what I'm generally going for in the cities. I don't want to place too many large buildings like these sorts of things. I don't want too much of that going on. In the beginning, it's totally fine because, you know, cities take time to develop, and that's the case here as well, where I started out with a lot of these smaller homes and eventually they will be larger. But for now, you know, this is just going to look a little bit out of place, and that tends to happen sometimes. So, and another thing while I'm over here too, I think that putting this road up to here kind of activates this land right here a little bit. While it's quite hilly, there's at least something that I can do over here now. And I still preserve this space here, which is where I want to put my highway bridge. So I think what I can do is I can actually extend out this grid just to meet up right here. If I check the gradient again, there's definitely some stuff that I could do over here, but I don't know that I want to continue this road exactly like out this way. I think what's going to have to happen is eventually these are going to have to turn to follow this hill. And I think I'll kind of map that out, what I'm looking for, but I won't do the full thing. So basically what I want is for this road to kind of just follow this hill right here, but I won't terraform too much. I just want to get the gist of what I'm going for in place, which is something like that. So I want the road to continue this way, and eventually it's going to meet up over here. But for now, I just want to get that angle correct. And once again, I'm just measuring things out. Like, I didn't want to actually put that road there, just measuring out the right distances so I can maintain sort of this grid right here. And now that I'm thinking about it, like if this is going to turn like this, maybe really all I want to maintain is just that one location, and that'll be where the grid pivots, as these roads will probably also turn in a similar fashion. And then up here, I want to probably continue this all the way through again. And then what I'll maybe do is actually delete this connection, because I don't want too many connections on that road. There's no reason for it. It's not a particularly like highly trafficked road. So what I'll do is I'll just make this one connection back this way. And then I'll leave what's going on here for now. But this kind of opens up these two blocks to, you know, I'll put in just a little bit more of our industrial. And I think a parking lot over here would be good. Now that we have kind of a lot of money, I think enough money at least. Actually, the healthcare budget is all the way up at 100%. So what I'm concerned about is we're seeing a lot more of these ambulance symbols popping up, which is telling me that we probably just don't have enough availability. Yeah, so we definitely don't have enough availability. And I wonder, I don't think I can make this facility any larger. Yeah, so I can't do that. What I probably gonna have to do is put in a larger medical clinic somewhere. And that will take up quite a significant amount of our budget. So I want to be cognizant of that as well. So the healthcare coverage, you can kind of see where it's the worst. I prefer to place it close to other residential uses rather than the industrial uses over here. So I kind of want to place it in this sort of a region, and I might be able to get away with a small clinic, but I don't think it's a good idea right now. I think the city's getting large enough to justify a larger medical clinic, and there's the busy town, just as I said that. I'll take a look at that later, but I think what I want to do is probably place it right in here, and let me take a look at the grading. It's really not the best grading wise, but I think if I just place it down, it shouldn't look too bad. It looks a little bit wonky right here, but I'm okay with that. I think that's good enough for me. And then this allows me to have enough space to add on potentially later as well. I'm just going to leave it as is for now. But that should sort out that particular issue. It did take quite a bit out of our monthly balance, but we're still positive there, so I'm pretty happy about that. And with that medical facility place, what I want to turn my attention to is a couple other city services that we've been lacking, and I've been seeing it over here on Chirper, and specifically that is going to be the communications services, so that's post and then also telecom. I'm going to start with telecom, and I want to put a radio mast up on this hill where the water tower is. And the reason that I want to put it there is that it's, again, kind of just like more or less junk land to me, because eventually it's going to be a freeway and bridge. Ultimately, I can delete that later on if I want to, and it's a pretty low stakes building. So I'll go ahead, and it's also on a hill, so it should give pretty decent coverage. So I take a look at the topo map here. I think what I want it to be over in this area, so I'll actually just go ahead and place that right over there. Should be good, and I'll build out a road to it. And let's check the coverage. I don't think it's actually that good. Yeah, it's not great. It's actually quite poor, because the one issue with that area, actually, now that I'm looking at it, is that it is just not near anything. It's totally not centralized near any of the buildings. It does give us pretty good coverage down here and a little bit over here, but what would really help is having something kind of over in this area. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and do that and try to place one over on this hill, and I may get one more over near this farm. If we check the coverage with that, it is pretty good. Again, the issue is that the placement of these is not very central. I could maybe try to get one into this interior area here, and I may look into that really quick to see if there's any open plots of land I can throw this into. After looking around just a little bit, it didn't really take much to realize that probably this area is the best place to do this. And what I want to do is I actually want to extend Dale Street here a little bit and probably take this house out, which is unfortunate. But the reason I want to do that is I want to toss it kind of back here, so it's a little bit out of the way and not fronting any of these major streets here. That's pretty far from perfect because I would have to take out these homes here, but I think I want to take that mulligan because I just want it to be back there. It's really just a personal preference thing. So what I'll do is I'll try to get the buildings to build in around that if I can. Might be tough with how the zoning is now. Let's see if I can get it to work. So that's good. And then I'll just landscape really quick with some larger trees. Yeah, and kind of unfortunate, but I did do a lot of removing of homes and then rebuilding them, but I really wanted to get that sort of dense barrier of trees around the radio mast because it's so centralized here. So at least like these people in these homes aren't just staring directly at it. That definitely cost us a lot in our monthly balance. and we are now dipping into the negative. So I'm going to check out the taxation and probably just bump up industrial by 1%. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that for now. That should be enough to get us back into the positive. And then I want to turn my attention back to this area since we kind of have all sorts of demands popping in. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of put in a few different things, and I will put in one parking lot here, probably just a small one. And I just rounded this area out with this one small parking lot. I squeezed in a small playground in there because there was space for it, and then put some landscaping here to create a small barrier between these homes, and then this commercial and office here. And yeah, just some additional landscaping around this large building to make it not stick out so much on its own. And then there's two things I want to finish off with. One is I want to add in at least one post office and then probably some mailboxes around the city. The other is I kind of just want to fill out some more space with low density residential, pretty just indiscriminately. I don't care too much about it going into quote unquote the wrong place right now. I just kind of want to fill things out where there's empty spaces like over here and right here and in these sorts of areas, just so it's not so barren. It looks a little bit more complete for the moment. And for the post office, I want it relatively central. I'm eyeballing this area here, but I think that's not really good enough. I'd rather have it somewhere in this sort of an area. I'm not exactly sure where I can fit it in. There's not really any empty land that I have anymore after I just filled out some of this space. I could place it in one of these areas here. Kind of think I actually will. I think I will do that actually. It just makes sense. I mean, these aren't built in just yet. I can pick out that one and then another building will spawn in. That'll be perfectly okay. And then I'll just get a few extra trees in here to finish it off. And yeah, that's definitely central enough. It covers a lot of this neighborhood here, and I'll kind of just pepper in some mailboxes where there's not enough coverage. And I'll try to focus it on some corners. Like this is a great corner to put one. And if I can, probably near commercial buildings, but that won't be the case everywhere. I think, you know, this is another good example of a good spot for one. And then if people want to mail things out from work over here, they can do that there. There's a little bit of a gap here, so I'll also put one probably on this corner here. Yeah, and for the low density, I kind of, yeah, mostly just want to fill this out. I think I'll avoid the Embarcadero right here and just kind of place it up till that point. And actually, I do have the demand for some commercial, so I'll place at least some of that in, and I think even some additional smaller medium density, maybe a European medium density there. Maybe, since it's kind of at the end here, what I'll do actually is put in some of the row homes right there. It'll look maybe a little bit awkward. I may change that later on, but for now, yeah, it just kind of fills out the space, which is what I'm going for. And then I'll go ahead and just put some trees in too. And that definitely gives it a more complete feel after adding some of the landscaping and some larger buildings throughout here. And ultimately, I think like this Embarcadero will change a lot over the lifetime of the city just because it's such high value land. There's going to be a lot of pressure to redevelop it to, you know, probably higher density uses or just changing up the uses. I do want to keep this waterfront area though empty for now, because one of two things will happen. Either that'll become a park or some other waterfront amenity I'd like to keep it as public as possible. The other thing that could happen is the land could be filled in and this waterfront could be extended out, at which point I'll be doing something completely different. So whether or not I do a park or choose to extend a little bit is kind of going to be the driving factor for what this area ends up looking like in the future. So for now, I just want to kind of leave it until I have a better idea of what I want to put there. And then for the rest of like these empty areas right here and right here, and this area right here and up to this space right here, what I'll do is I'll just fill it out with some low density residential and leave space for future roads. Like right here will be a road at some point. And the reason I'm not being too picky about how the zoning comes in these sorts of areas is because I'll probably end up changing it later anyways. So it's really not a big deal if it's not perfect right now. You know, this is fronting like Market Street right by the highway. So realistically, it's like not a great place for low density residential zoning. But yeah, like I said, it's probably going to change in the end. So not too big of a deal to me at the moment. As long as there's like sight lines right here, it's kind of fine in my estimation. And then I left this gap here in case I wanted to expand the crematorium. And this space up here, I'm just leaving for now because it is pretty steep terrain. So I'm going to want to give like a little bit more attention to where I place the roads up here, which will require me to be buying at least these two tiles right here and possibly this one as well, just so I have like a better sense of where to place the roads and I can actually place them where I want to. So I'm going to leave it for now. That's definitely a future episode of developing this hillside a little further. I think realistically it probably develops a little bit later on, just because it's harder to develop than say land out here is much easier to develop. And I think the last thing I want to do to close out this episode is actually just to put some trees in this area here. I don't know that I'll have enough money to really place too many. So what I'll do is I'll actually simulate a little bit faster just to get some money for that. I'll place kind of as many trees and I'll try to make like pockets of trees actually. So it's not just entirely forested, but just to give this a little bit more visual interest, because right now it's, you know, just this big green open space. So I'd like to change that up a little bit. And actually right before I do that, I think I want to fill out this space, probably just with some offices. So I think this looks a little bit more complete, at least. It doesn't look so barren anymore, which I'm a big fan of. I put in some palm trees over here. I don't really know how realistic that is. Like, I don't think they're really native to the San Francisco Bay Area, but for sure you do see palm trees around. So I threw them into this kind of like lagoon area. It's like wetland area. I think it does look a little bit better than having like these pine and spruce trees like butting up against the water. So I think it looks good enough, and I threw some rocks in as well just to give it a little bit more texture. And the last thing I do want to do to just round this area out is just to throw in some small homes here, residential homes there. And I'll just throw some trees in the back there as well. And I'm going to slow down the time for a second. Yeah, over in this area, you can kind of see what I've done with the former landfill. Like this hill here, this mound, is where I'm kind of saying the remainder of the garbage was kept, and then it was capped. There's ways you can do this. I watched a video from the Practical Engineering YouTube channel about landfills, and essentially, like, you can do these sorts of things, from what I understand. So that's where I'd like to leave things off for this episode. To recap, what we did is first we moved this landfill all the way over to here from this area, and then on top of the old landfill, I placed a small park with some tennis courts and a skate park. And then in general, in this area right here, just put in some landscaping to make it feel a little bit more complete. And then over in this area, expanded the grid a little bit and added some additional industrial zoning back here. And in some of these empty spaces, like over here and over on this end, I just filled it out with low density residential with the intent of probably changing that later on. In general, just expanded city services quite a bit. So added in a water pumping station over here to meet that demand. And then another water tower over here, which is has a dual purpose of adding additional water capacity as well as sewage capacity. And also detailed this high school out a little bit and left some space over here for a future football field. And then lastly, yeah, added in some communications towers and a post office in this area here. At this point, I'm also satisfied with having a positive monthly balance as well as some money still in the bank. Costanoa is kind of reaching the limits of its available land right now, and it will have to probably start expanding across to the other side of this highway pretty soon. So that is definitely something I'll take on in future episodes. But for now, I want to thank anyone who has been watching, and then also if you have any feedback, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below. And I will see you in the next one.